Amy Bishop had impressive credentials.
She's a very well-educated woman.
She always introduced herself as Dr. Amy Bishop, Harvard trained.
But credentials aren't everything.
She had erratic, bizarre behavior.
She didn't communicate well.
She had been denied tenure.
And in February of 2010, Amy lashed out in the deadliest possible way.
The shots just began to ring out.
2 of the victims were instantly dead.
It was chaos.
Was it a case of temporary insanity?
I think she's wacko.
Or would Amy Bishop's past reveal more violence and more victims?
Her brother had been shot to death.
Huntsville, Alabama, February 12, 2010. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon when professors from the biology department at the University of Alabama, Huntsville, gathered for a faculty meeting at the school's Shelby Center for Science and Technology. Home to almost 8,000 students and enjoying close ties with NASA's Marshall Space Flight Center, UAH's well-regarded science programs drew researchers and faculty from across the country.
The research that is done here has attracted people from Stanford, from MIT.
One of them was Assistant Professor Amy Bishop, a 45-year-old scientist with a PhD in genetics.
She always introduced herself as Dr. Amy Bishop, Harvard trained. And it was her way of saying, Harvard is better than, wherever you went to school.
But Amy, whose performance at the university had been poorly reviewed, had recently lost her bid for tenure.
She wasn't necessarily expected to be at that meeting, and there was some surprise that she was there.
They were talking about the schedule for that summer and for that fall when she was not going to be there.
So, in a way, she's sitting there watching the world kind of move on without her.
She sat silently for nearly an hour, and then it became suddenly, horrifyingly clear why Dr. Bishop had crashed the faculty meeting.
The call came out as a shooting. It turned into a shooting with multiple victims.
By 4 p.m., the UAH campus was swarming with emergency personnel, responding to multiple 911 calls.
Everybody knew we had a bad situation.
As police entered the Science Center, the university's students were alerted to the danger.
They told us that there had been a campus shooting and just to remain indoors.
You hear about these things happening in other towns, but not in Huntsville.
Within minutes, police had a suspect in custody, Dr. Amy Bishop.
The moment that we came across her, we detained her because we felt like she may have some involvement in it.
And it was a shock. It was a shock. It was a scary time.
Born in 1965, Amy Bishop grew up outside Boston in the upper middle-class suburb of Braintree, Massachusetts.
She was from a family that was very musical, very brilliant. Her father was a professor at Northeastern University in Boston.
She had lots of advantages, lots of good schooling and lots of musical opportunities, and she had broad interest and was very accomplished.
But for all her accomplishments, Amy often found herself outshined by her younger brother, Seth.
Her brother was perhaps a little more accomplished and beloved than she was.
Perhaps as a result, Amy grew into a sullen and awkward teen.
She had a very high IQ, but she also lacked sort of the common sense, and certainly she lacked social skills.
She had erratic, bizarre behavior at times.
She would just, what they say, go off on people for no apparent reason.
Amy's social struggles continued when she entered Northeastern University in 1983.
She was too difficult in class. She didn't communicate well. She was kind of scatterbrained.
But she did achieve one social success. After joining the university's Dungeons and Dragons Club, she met a fellow biology major named James Anderson.
He was very brilliant, too, and she needed somebody that she could communicate with on the same intellectual level.
The pair was soon inseparable.
I remember asking him what had initially attracted him to her, and he said because she was just so beautiful and so smart, and that he was drawn to her.
Neither one of them could probably be a fit with anybody else. They were kind of a good match in that way.
But even as Amy found happiness with James, her rivalry with her younger brother rekindled. In the fall of 1986, Amy's junior year, Seth Bishop started as a freshman at Northeastern.
She and her younger brother Seth were both students at Northeastern at the same time.
Seth's time at Northeastern would be short, however. By the end of the semester, he would be dead. On December 6, 1986, Amy and her brother were visiting their parents for the weekend. But that Saturday morning, everyone was out, except for Amy.
The narrative is that she was left home alone, the house had been broken into before, she was nervous.
Amy told the police that, afraid to be alone, she had retrieved her father's shotgun.
He had a shotgun that he had bought for Seth to be on the rifle team. And so the shotgun was in the house.
When Amy's mother and brother arrived home later, she supposedly came downstairs and started to hand the shotgun to Seth.
She said, "I can't get this unloaded." And when she handed it to Seth, her mother said something like, "Be careful, that might go off and hurt somebody."
According to Amy and her mother, that's precisely what happened.
It fired into Seth's chest, and he was mortally wounded.
Rushed to the hospital, Seth died later that day, and the police ruled the shooting a tragic accident.
After a very short investigation, the case was dropped. There was never any charges brought against her.
In the wake of the shooting, with James's support, Amy did her best to move on.
She had sort of tried to put that behind her.
In the summer of 1989, nearly 3 years after her brother's death, Amy and James were married. Soon after, the couple settled into Cambridge, Massachusetts, so that Amy could attend graduate school at Harvard.
She's a very well-educated woman.
But the trauma of her brother's tragic death may have lingered. Less than a year after completing her PhD, she abruptly left her research position at Boston Children's Hospital.
Her supervisor said she was unstable, depressed, and exhibited violent behavior.
Amy and James struggled for the next 9 years. He freelanced as a computer engineer, while she went from one low-paying research job or fellowship to another, unable to secure a full-time position.
We know when you're in the research process, you're not making a lot of money.
The couple also started a family, and by 2003, Amy and James had 4 children.
Her husband, James Anderson, said, "We're just a house full of geeks. Everyone's a scientist, everyone's a musician. You know, we're always talking about, very high-minded things, and there's probably not a lot of television watching that went on in that household. They were always involved in some academic pursuit."
They lived in a neighborhood in Boston that apparently was, your typical small-town neighborhood, lots of kids and dogs and good times.
But they were about to leave Massachusetts behind. In 2003, Amy applied for a teaching position at the University of Alabama in Huntsville.
It's an outstanding research university, but it's not widely known. I think as she was looking around for jobs, there are a lot of things to recommend about Huntsville and about UAH.
University of Alabama Huntsville has an outstanding reputation as a research school.
Although after 10 stressful years in Massachusetts, the school's reputation wasn't the only or even the main attraction.
This was an opportunity to get on a tenure track.
The job stability was very important to her.
And despite the fact that her resume revealed a significant amount of turnover in her employment history, Amy got the job.
You see Harvard on a resume, you think, well, this person's got to be sharp.
At first, Amy excelled in her new job.
She was kind of excited to be there. She was funny. She was energetic. She wanted to be a part of everything that happened on the campus.
The students liked her.
She would always help you out. She'd give extra credit on a test. If you needed help, she would help you out.
And Amy's research appeared promising too.
She and her husband developed an electronic petri dish
It's an automated cell incubator, and the idea is to keep the cells alive longer so that they can be more beneficial.
The invention brought more than $1 million of research funding to the university and could eventually produce an even bigger payoff for Amy and James.
She potentially had a lot of money coming to her in the future.
Amy also hoped her invention would guarantee her bid for tenure at the university. Although after the success of the invention, Amy seemed to put her career on cruise control.
She became less interested.
There were complaints that she hadn't published as much as she should have.
She also began sparring with her colleagues in the biology department.
Whenever she was in a room, she had to have something to say about everything. Manipulate the conversation or change it in her direction.
The picture that emerges is somebody who is tough-minded, somebody who just didn't back down.
I mean, she obviously had a volatile personality that she could be on or she could be off.
Amy's lackluster publishing and blunt interpersonal skills led to a bitter disappointment. In the spring of 2009, her bid for tenure was denied.
It was such a blow to her to find out that she was not going to be retained. They weren't going to keep her.
At first, Amy appeared depressed by the news.
She had told some of her colleagues that this was the end of her life, that she didn't think she even needed to go on, and she had thought about suicide.
But it wasn't long before her depression turned to anger.
She just couldn't believe that these people at UAH that had not anywhere near the status that Harvard had could possibly turn her down.
Amy seemed to believe the school administration had made some sort of mistake.
She spent months trying to appeal that decision.
She went to people in her department that she considered to be, sort of on her side, and just pestered them to put in a plea for her to change their mind.
Amy spent almost a year in agonizing limbo, exhausting her appeals.
There was a tremendous anxiety on her part of losing the job.
In February of 2010, some of her students took up her cause.
And just as some students complained about her erratic behavior, other students had started a petition to sign to get her to receive her tenure.
But by Friday morning, February 12th, it was clear that the appeals had failed.
She was told, "No, thank you. We no longer want you."
However, until the end of the semester, she still had classes to teach. So by 10 o'clock that morning, she was on campus. But it was obvious that she had something else on her mind.
That was the first time anyone could ever remember her being late. She walked in class, just put her notes down, and started talking. Didn't, introduce herself, didn't say hey, wasn't talking to the students like usual. And she rushed through the lecture.
She was acting a bit erratic. She was talking off topic.
Amy's demeanor wasn't the only unusual thing that her students would later recall.
Normally she didn't carry a purse, but that day she brought a big canvas bag into class.
The contents of the bag and the reason for Amy's bizarre behavior would soon become shockingly clear.
Just a very few hours later, the fateful staff meeting happened.
Coming up, a routine faculty meeting erupts in gunfire.
The shots just begin to ring out.
And the campus is thrown into chaos.
There were kids streaming out of this building. At the same time, SWAT team members are going inside.
Huntsville, Alabama, February 12, 2010. It was 3 o'clock in the afternoon when Dr. Amy Bishop showed up at a meeting of faculty for the University of Alabama, Huntsville, which surprised her fellow professors in the university's biology department.
They all thought it was kind of strange that she was there.
Much to her dismay, the 45-year-old researcher had recently been denied tenure and was supposed to be leaving at the end of the semester.
It was unexpected. You're a Harvard-trained biologist. You've done this work. You figure, I'm gold, and she wasn't.
Amy's reaction was just as unexpected. After sitting quietly for nearly an hour, The PhD pulled a 9mm pistol from the canvas tote on her lap.
All of a sudden, the shots just began to ring out.
That's when all just chaos broke loose.
Panicked faculty and staff dove for cover under the conference table as Amy opened fire on those seated closest to her.
They were totally caught off guard by what her actions were going to be.
The people that were in that room, they didn't go into that meeting armed. They didn't go in with bulletproof vests. They had an expectation that it was another faculty meeting.
Within seconds, 6 faculty and staff had been shot.
It was just all really fast.
But just as suddenly as the shooting started, it stopped.
The gun is jammed, and so she can't get a shot off.
She kept clicking, clicking, clicking.
As Amy struggled to clear the jam, one of her quick-thinking colleagues seized the opportunity.
She kind of got up and pushed Amy out of the room and shut the door.
One of the other professors ran up and locked it, and then they started moving furniture up against the door.
The threat removed, the faculty barricaded in the conference room began to frantically call for help.
They had used their cell phones immediately. They're calling 911, get help, get help.
But for 3 of Amy's victims, it was already too late.
2 of the victims they knew were instantly dead.
One of the victims was taking his last ragged breaths.
But 3 more lay bleeding on the conference room floor, tended by the half-dozen faculty members who had escaped unharmed.
All their attention started being focused on the 3 others who were still awake.
They were trying to stop the bleeding.
Meanwhile, Dr. Amy Bishop was still at large and armed on a campus of almost 8,000 students. Numerous students and staff within the Shelby Center for Science and Technology heard the shots that afternoon. And almost immediately, Madison County 911 was flooded with calls from the campus.
No one knew, exactly how many people were shot, how many people got injured, if anyone was killed yet. So no one knew what was going on. It was chaos.
The Huntsville police surrounded the building within minutes.
I was sitting up in my dorm room, which is right next to the building that it occurred in, and look outside my window, and there's cop cars all over the place.
It quickly became a major operation in a very short period of time.
There were emergency vehicles, police cars everywhere.
Every law enforcement agency in Madison County was descending on the UAH campus.
Patrol officers set up a perimeter around the Shelby Center, while the Huntsville PD SWAT team stormed the building.
We had people that we knew were wounded. We had many students inside the building that we had to get out.
There were kids streaming out of this building at the same time SWAT team members are going inside. It was just chaos.
While frightened students and staff ran from the building, the SWAT team and first responders rushed to the 3rd floor conference room.
We were trying to get medical assistance inside to help them and get them out to get them treated.
Then, as the EMTs went to work, the SWAT team fanned out, searching the building for the woman survivors had identified as the shooter.
We knew the description of who we were looking for, and we thought we were pretty sure we had the identity of the person we were looking for.
We realized that we probably had a single shooter and that it was indeed Amy Bishop.
But could they find Amy amidst the chaos on campus?
The suspect could have got out before we got there, or the suspect could still be in the building, or the suspect could be with the crowd.
Worst of all, she could be preparing to strike again.
People were very afraid. We didn't know if there were other victims on other floors. Nobody knew yet.
But then, mere minutes after the shootings occurred, 2 of the patrol officers manning the perimeter around the Shelby Center noticed a woman standing on the building's loading dock. It was Amy Bishop.
They already knew it was her from the 911 calls inside. They knew it was her.
When the officers approached, Amy surrendered without a fight.
They slapped handcuffs on her and put her in a car.
Our photographer shot an extraordinary photo of her being put into the police car. And it's a chilling shot because it's somebody who looks still enraged.
Amy may have been enraged, but her husband, James, who arrived on the scene at more or less the same moment that photo was taken, was simply confused. He told the officers at the scene that Amy had called him minutes earlier, asking for a ride.
She calls her husband and says, "Hey, can you come pick me up? I'll meet you at the loading dock behind the building."
He pulled around the loading docks by the side of the building to pick her up, only to see her be put into a police car.
And when the officers told James why his wife was being handcuffed, his confusion turned to horror.
It was just beyond his belief. He couldn't fathom it either.
It's something that you don't ever want to see happen.
However, unlike James, the police had no trouble believing that Amy was the perpetrator.
There were witnesses to the incident that were able to positively identify Amy Bishop, and that led to quickly resolving the case in terms of identifying the offender and taking the offender in custody.
But just because Amy was already in custody, that didn't mean the investigators' work was done.
It still merits a thorough and complete investigation in order to determine what physical evidence exists, and so that it can be prepared for presentation at trial.
The first step was locating the 9mm that Amy had used to shoot 6 of her colleagues.
Well, the weapon wasn't with the suspect when the suspect came outside, so we realized somewhere within that large building we probably had the weapon.
That evening, while Amy was transported to the Huntsville Police Department for questioning, the investigators began a methodical search of the Shelby Center.
The entire building actually became a crime scene, so we had to secure the entire building and search the whole building.
They have to go through every single trash can, every single desk drawer, every receptacle of any kind.
Finally, in the trash can of a second-floor bathroom, the investigators found what they had been looking for.
After the shooting, they say that Amy took the gun and put it in the trash can and covered it up with some toilet paper.
Meanwhile, as darkness fell and word of the shooting spread, the UAH campus struggled to sort out what just happened.
We knew one suspect was in custody, didn't know it was a woman or a man at the point.
We didn't know if it was a student or not.
We don't like to release any information unless we are absolutely sure that it is correct information and accurate information and information that does not compromise our investigation.
The fact that the police had yet to release the identities of the victims only added to the anxiety on campus.
You know, there's a lot of shock. A lot of people crying. A lot of people scared, calling, trying to find their loved ones.
I had so many family members calling me worried. Friends I hadn't talked to in years saying, you know, are you okay? Is everything fine? I remember some of my friends that were in that building, I was texting them, seeing if they were okay, because I couldn't get to them, you know, and that was a scary time.
Finally, at a little before midnight, the police released one vital piece of information: the shooter's identity.
She was charged, and at the time that she was charged is when we made our media notifications.
The news sent another wave of shock across campus.
When you hear that there's a shooting on a college campus, you assume it's student on student. By no means would we have thought that it was a biology professor.
Amy Bishop's biology students were particularly stunned.
You go from seeing her in class to seeing her on TV in an orange jumpsuit. You just don't expect that from professors.
Amy's students may have been shocked by her arrest, but the professor had another surprise in store. During her first public statement, made that night as she was transferred to the Madison County Jail.
It didn't happen. There's no way.
What about the people who died?
There's no way they're still alive.
Coming up, the investigation uncovers shocking secrets in Amy's past.
She was suspected of trying to send a bomb through the mail.
And her attorney makes a startling admission.
I think she's wacko.
By the afternoon of February 13, 2010, it had been 24 hours since Dr. Amy Bishop had opened fire during a faculty meeting at the University of Alabama in Huntsville campus. 3 of her colleagues in the school's biology department were dead.
Dr. Gopi Padilla, he was the head of the biology department. Dr. Adriel Johnson, Dr. Maria Ragland Davis, those were the 3 who died.
3 of the 9 survivors in the room were also injured.
There were others in the conference room who were not physically injured, but obviously lived with the effects of the shooting.
No students were harmed, but in the aftermath of the shooting, the entire student body was more than a little shell-shocked.
The shock that some of their professors were never coming back ever again, that was tough.
The same was true of the shooter's identity.
We had seen Miss Bishop being put into the cars. That's when I couldn't believe it. I grew up here, and I had known her kids. I went to high school with her kids. I knew them. I knew her. And it was a shock.
Shocking or not, all the survivors from the conference room had identified Amy as the shooter.
It wasn't a whodunit. There was no dispute that she had done it.
But Amy had flatly denied it when she was taken into custody the night before.
This didn't happen. There's no way.
What about the people who died?
There's no way they're still alive.
She just kept shaking her head. It wasn't me. Didn't happen.
Was she simply in denial? Or was there another motive behind Amy's behavior?
You watch that video and you wonder, was she already planning some sort of defense or something?
The speculation only intensified days later when, in the middle of an interview, Amy's attorney gave a surprisingly frank summation of his client's character.
I think she's wacko.
Most people felt that he said that she was wacko so that he could later put in a plea of insanity for her.
For the moment, the investigators and prosecutors weren't too worried about an insanity plea. As far as they were concerned, the evidence painted Amy's rampage as a carefully planned, premeditated act.
She had time to pack a bag with a loaded gun, and she had time to sit in that meeting for 45 to 50 minutes knowing what she was about to do.
She also had an obvious motive: the failure of her appeal for tenure.
When that failed, she decided that it was time for revenge, and that she was going to take care of the people that she thought had ruined her career.
She felt like she was so smart and so capable that it just could not click in her head that everyone didn't see her as amazing, didn't see her as Dr. Amy Bishop.
However, there was more to Amy Bishop than her PhD. Digging into her past, the investigators quickly discovered that she had previously been involved in another fatal shooting.
Her brother had been shot to death many years earlier.
At the time, Seth Bishop's death had been ruled an accident.
She's never charged anything, so she had a clean record.
But now, with 3 people dead in Huntsville, the Massachusetts authorities were beginning to wonder.
Maybe this wasn't an accidental shooting. Maybe it was planned.
And it wasn't just the shootings in Huntsville that had the authorities reconsidering Seth Bishop's death.
She was suspected of trying to send a bomb through the mail.
In December of 1993, just a few weeks after she had resigned from Boston Children's Hospital, the supervisor whose scathing review had prompted Amy to leave had come home to a mysterious package on his doorstep.
It was a white box that had 6 29-cent stamps on it that were uncanceled. And it was in between the screen door and the main door.
Amy's supervisor called the police, and the bomb squad removed the package, which did contain explosives. And the investigation soon focused on Amy Bishop.
In fairness, if there was a case there, you'd expect it to have been brought.
No one had been injured in the mail bombing incident, so the Massachusetts authorities declined to reopen the matter. But the same wasn't true for the 1986 shooting of Amy's brother.
It was reopened in June of 2010 after the shootings happened in February.
Reopening the 23-year-old case proved to be a challenge.
Some of the investigators had died, and they weren't able to talk to everyone who investigated that one.
Even the case files had gone missing.
Come to find out, they were in the chief of police's home. He was retired by then.
But once the investigators managed to track down the files, they made some surprising discoveries about then 21-year-old Amy's actions after shooting her brother.
She goes out the door. Mother says to go find a nurse, to help a neighbor's a nurse. But she wanders down the street instead and ends up in a car lot, attempts to jack a car.
Brandished a gun and pointed it at some of the employees there and demanded a car.
Soon after, a police officer had arrived at the dealership to try and defuse the situation.
She leveled the gun at him, and he had his gun out, and they had a standoff.
After several tense moments, Amy had given in.
They ordered her to drop it or they would shoot, and so she put the weapon down.
Amy's mother had backed up her account of the accidental shooting. However, the attempted carjacking and the standoff with the police had inexplicably been left out of the official report sent to prosecutors.
There were some who believed that there was a giant cover-up that had taken place.
Or was it simply sympathy on the part of local law enforcement?
This is a 21-year-old girl, had just seen her brother shot. You picture an incident like that and you're shattered and you set the gun down and you run screaming. You don't normally hear of people drawing down on a law enforcement officer.
Either way, the prosecutors now decided they had made a mistake in not charging Amy 23 years earlier.
She was indicted in Massachusetts for the killing of her brother. She was charged with murder there.
The news hit Amy hard.
She didn't want to have to open up this case in Braintree, Massachusetts, and have her parents have to relive this.
In fact, Amy was so determined to stop the case from going forward that a few days after the charges were filed on June 16th, she made a drastic move.
She attempted suicide in the Madison County Jail.
She was taken to the hospital for treatment. She survived, and she was taken back to jail.
But was the fact that Amy's suicide attempt failed simply delaying the inevitable? In Huntsville, there was no shortage of people demanding that Amy be executed for what she had done.
There was a lot of anger, a lot of visceral anger towards her and what she had done. And there was no small amount of a chorus for hang her high.
A lot of the students that were there, they all said death penalty. They said she's crazy, put her to death.
And in May of 2011, they more or less got their wish. The Madison County District Attorney's Office announced they would seek the death penalty against Amy. Coming up, Amy makes a desperate move to avoid the death penalty.
The whole campus was enraged.
And the DA gets a surprising request.
It was the victims and their families who came to him.
By September of 2011, it had been more than a year and a half since Dr. Amy Bishop had opened fire in a crowded conference room at the University of Alabama in Huntsville. 3 of her colleagues had died that day, 3 others had been wounded, and the campus community had spent the year and a half since struggling with the aftermath.
People have this idea that when you're on a college campus or school campus, that's a safe place. And this shooting just kind of shatters that.
Needless to say, many on campus wanted justice.
We all, want her prosecuted to the fullest because, that affected all of us because we went there, we experienced it. It was tragic for all of us being there.
Amy Bishop and her attorneys had other ideas, however. At her arraignment hearing on September 22, 2011, she pled not guilty by reason of mental disease or defect.
When she pled not guilty due to reason of insanity, I don't think anyone was surprised.
After all, just days after the shooting, Amy's own attorney had described her as wacko.
They had built up this whole defense that she's insane.
Not that knowing it was coming made Amy's plea any easier to take.
When she pled not guilty because of insanity, the whole campus was out, enraged. We didn't want her to get away with it.
Even worse was the worry that Amy's insanity defense just might work.
She certainly exhibited the behavior of someone who was not mentally stable.
But while the public fretted over whether or not Amy's insanity plea would succeed, the district attorney's office remained focused on securing a conviction. And they remained committed to seeking the death penalty.
It fit every criteria. It was one of the worst cases that this county has ever known.
But soon after the arraignment, an unlikely group came forward asking the DA not to pursue the death penalty. and it was a group that he would find difficult to ignore.
It was the victims and their families who came to him.
The victims' families came together and said it's greater, it's easier for them if they just sought life without parole.
Mindful of the victims and their families, the DA approached Amy's attorneys and offered a deal. If Amy would plead guilty and accept life without parole, they would drop the death penalty, but only on one condition.
By taking the life in prison plea, she had to sign a waiver that she would never appeal the process.
Initially, Amy refused the offer.
We were expecting it to go to trial. We were expecting a long trial, possibly a month.
But then, in September of 2012, with her trial date approaching, Amy suddenly relented.
It was her parents who helped to talk her into taking the plea agreement.
She pleaded guilty on September 11th, 2012.
However, due to a quirk in Alabama law, Amy's plea wasn't the end of the matter. A jury still had to hear the case.
Here, if you are charged with a capital crime and you plead guilty to it, there still has to be a trial. It's a chance for a jury to hear evidence and just make sure that you really did do this.
So on September 24th, 2012, an anxious crowd filled the Madison County Courthouse for Amy's proceeding.
They expected a lot of emotion in there. The victims' families and the victims were in there as well.
Once they were all in the room, Amy made a dramatic entrance.
All of a sudden you hear the chains because she's shackled. She's got the chains around her ankles, and you hear the chains rattle down the hall.
But it wasn't just Amy's shackles, jumpsuit, and bulletproof vest that shocked the audience in the courtroom.
She looked evil. It's like she was hiding it, and then she wasn't afraid to hide anymore after she did it.
You see her, and she looks like she's been through hell and back. That's scary.
As the prosecutors started laying out the case against her, Amy appeared disconnected from the proceedings.
She had very little expression. She's staring straight ahead.
Amy even sat emotionless when the coworker who had shoved her out of the conference room door took the stand and described the horrific events that left 3 of her colleagues dead.
She was in the conference room. She survived the shooting. She talked about the scene.
The closest Amy came to emotion was when the prosecutors displayed crime scene photos showing the grisly aftermath of Amy's rampage.
The pictures were taken where the bodies had fallen. They hadn't been moved. I don't think I've ever seen anything like that before.
Amy had seen it before over the muzzle of her gun, but this time she didn't look.
When the photos were shown, she put her head down and hid her head with her arms, and she didn't look at any of them.
Amy's refusal caused an immediate stir in the courtroom.
For most of us, we thought, why don't you look at that? What you've done. Is it so bad that you can't look at it? You are the cause of this? You should have to look at it.
Sensing the tension, the judge acted quickly to restore order.
He kept saying, everybody take a deep breath. He said that over and over again.
Finally, after several anxious hours, the prosecution wrapped up their case. And with Amy's guilty plea already in place, that essentially wrapped up the hearing, too.
There were no arguments. There were no objections. There were no, nobody disputed what had happened.
The jury didn't dispute it either. It took them less than 30 minutes to reach a verdict.
To nobody's surprise, the jury foreman announced that she had been found guilty.
There was no doubt after hearing the evidence that she committed this crime.
Few were surprised by the outcome, but the guilty verdict did bring a sense of relief.
Most people just wanted to make sure she would never have the opportunity for parole.
However, not everyone in Huntsville was satisfied that Amy would spend the rest of her life in prison.
She still got away with a less sentence than what most students would have wanted.
Coming up, Amy faces the prospect of another trial for the murder of her brother.
They had some reason to believe that maybe this wasn't an accident.
And this time, she's determined to fight.
She comes out and says, I want to have my trial in Massachusetts.
On September 24, 2012, an Alabama jury found Dr. Amy Bishop guilty of murder and sentenced her to life without parole.
The jury was out for about 15 minutes, and they came back and found her guilty of capital murder.
The jury's verdict was a mere formality, however. The 47-year-old professor at the University of Alabama in Huntsville had already pleaded guilty to murdering 3 of her colleagues during a shooting spree in February of 2010.
She has no recourse now. She cannot come back and change her mind. That's all done.
But there was one thing that wasn't done. Amy still faced another murder charge in Massachusetts. After the killings in Huntsville, the authorities in her hometown of Braintree had reopened the investigation into the 1986 shooting death of Amy's brother, Seth.
They had some reason to believe that maybe this wasn't an accident.
And in June of 2010, Amy had been charged with murder in connection with the 23-year-old incident.
They were going to bring her up and try her again, give her an extra life sentence.
But 4 days after she had been found guilty in Alabama, the prosecutors in Massachusetts announced that they would not prosecute Amy Bishop for murder.
Because she's now serving life without possibility of parole, there's no need for them to move forward with prosecuting her for that crime.
The Massachusetts authorities were satisfied, but Amy apparently wasn't. As soon as the DA in Braintree announced they weren't going to prosecute her for murder, Amy and her attorney filed papers demanding that the case move forward.
Suddenly she comes out and says, I want to have my trial in Massachusetts. It was an accident. We had a loving relationship. I'm not a bad person.
Despite Amy's wishes, the Massachusetts prosecutors are unlikely to move forward with the murder case. But that doesn't mean the courts are through with her.
There are civil lawsuits going now against the husband, against her.
Several of Amy's victims are seeking restitution, either for their injuries or the wrongful death of a loved one. And since Amy and her husband received proceeds from the Petri dish they invented, they still have assets that may be worth pursuing.
If there is any money to be made from the invention that Amy and her husband put together, then they'll go after that.
It only underscores what may be the biggest mystery of Amy Bishop. How could someone so gifted be capable?
My. Human beings are strange creatures, and I tell you, the arrogance of the criminal mind never ceases to amaze me. Take the case of Nicholas Cordova in Gilbert, Arizona, in the month of May 2020. A father, a businessman, a man building a life, suddenly gone in an instant. His partner, Dave Sweetman, is standing there with a 9mm handgun, telling a story about 2 mysterious intruders. You have to be kidding me. $1,000 is still in his pocket, and yet he claims it was a robbery? That is not how a robbery works. It is the kind of lazy, sloppy mistake that makes my blood boil, because it shows such total contempt for the victim and for the truth. Then you look at the case of Dr. Laura Sweetman, back in 2013. A brilliant woman, a mother dead in her own home, and the system fails her with an undetermined cause of death. How do you misplace a life? 13 years later, and we are still asking why, because the investigation was handled with all the care of a child playing with mud. It is insulting. And then there is Melissa Casillas, 2025. A woman vanishes into thin air, her phone's wiped clean, leaving behind a family torn between 2 different versions of the truth. People think they can disappear, that they can outrun the past, but the truth is a patient animal. It waits in the evidence, in the phone records, in the silence. Whether it is a partner with a grudge, a failing marriage, or the secrets of a high-tech facility, the pattern is always the same. It is the arrogance of thinking you are smarter than the investigators. But here's the reality. Justice is not a hobby. It is a duty, and the victims do not have a voice anymore. But the evidence, if you look hard enough, tells a story, so you just keep digging until the dirt turns into answers. Because that is what you owe the person who cannot ask for it themselves. And I tell you, there is no greater satisfaction than looking a killer in the eye and watching that arrogance drain away when they realize their time has finally run out. People are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you can imagine. I have spent a lifetime looking into the abyss, and I tell you, it never gets easier to understand the darkness in the human heart. You look at a case like that of Nicholas Cordova in Gilbert, Arizona, in May of 2020, and you realize how quickly a life can be snuffed out. A man, 40 years old, working hard at his business at 511 West Guadalupe Road, and suddenly he is a victim of a cold-blooded act. His business partner, Dave Sweetman, hands over a gun and tells a story about two intruders. Yet investigators find over $1,000 in his pocket. You have to be kidding me. Do they think we are stupid? It is a recurring nightmare of inconsistencies. Then you turn your eyes to the case of Laura Sweetman, lost to us in December of 2013. A brilliant doctor, a mother, found in circumstances that scream for investigation. Yet the system lets a trail go cold. No answers, just silence. It is an affront to her memory. And further back, in the summer of 1969, a young woman named Stephanie Casper, just on the cusp of her 18th birthday, has her future stolen near the Root River. Left in the debris, her life treated as if it were nothing by someone with enough time to carry out a horrifying act. I tell you, the common thread here is not just a crime. It is the wall of silence that follows. The families are left to wander through a labyrinth of redacted files and shifting stories for decades. It is a disgrace. We are talking about human beings, not case numbers. Whether it is a suspicious business deal, a domestic tragedy, or a young life lost in the shadows of the past, the truth is out there, trapped under layers of indifference and institutional failure. It takes a relentless spirit, like that of these grieving families, to keep the light burning when everyone else has turned away. I have seen justice delayed, and I have seen it denied, but I refuse to believe it is ever truly out of reach if we keep pushing. It is about accountability, it is about dignity, and it is about ensuring that those who have been wronged are not just names in a file, but voices that finally get their day in the truth. Human beings are strange creatures. They kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could possibly imagine. I have seen it all. I have walked into rooms where the air is thick with the scent of bad decisions, where a man thought he could outsmart the law. But the truth is a stubborn thing. It does not stay buried. Take the case of Nicholas Nick Cordova. Gilbert, Arizona, May 27, 2020. A quiet town until it was not. A husband, a father, a business owner. Just a man trying to live the American dream. And then at 5:30 in the evening, the lights went out for him forever. His children were on a video call. Imagine that. They heard the noise. They heard their father go silent. You have to be kidding me. When the police arrived at 511 West Guadalupe Road, they found a scene that reeked of a bad script. They found Dave Sweetman, the business partner. He was peeking through the blinds like a scared child. He handed over a bloody 9mm handgun. He claimed two men came in, attacked them, and fled. My, the oldest trick in the book. A classic deflection. But here's the problem with lies. They are hard to hold on to. Officers searched Sweetman. He claimed he was robbed, yet they found over $1,000 in his pocket. $1,000. Who leaves that behind in a robbery? It does not make sense. And that is the thing about murder. It rarely makes sense. There was tension between them, financial disputes. Life insurance policies worth $8 million. You think that is a coincidence? I tell you, I do not believe in coincidences. I believe in evidence. I believe in motives. And when you have a man who fears he is being watched by his own partner, when you have a man who worries his partner values him more dead than alive, you do not need a psychic to tell you what happened. You need a detective who knows how to listen. The police say the investigation is active, but to the family, to Alicia, it has been a 6-year hell. They are looking for justice. They are looking for the truth. And the truth is usually waiting in the shadows, just out of reach, but always there, gnawing at the conscience of the guilty. Some people think they can get away with it. They think time is on their side. They think if they wait long enough, the world will forget. But the world does not forget, and neither does the detective. Every detail, every inconsistency, it all adds up to a portrait of a soul that has lost its way. And that is the tragedy of it all. Not just the loss of a life, but the betrayal of trust that makes the rest of us look over our shoulders, wondering if the person standing next to us is really who they say they are. People are strange creatures, and they kill for the most ridiculous reasons you could ever imagine. And I tell you, after 30 years in homicide, nothing surprises me anymore, but it still makes me sick to my stomach. You look at the case of Nick Cordova in Gilbert, Arizona, in the year 2020, and you have to be kidding me. A man is gunned down at his office, and his business partner is found right there with a bloody gun, telling a story that sounds like a bad dime store novel. 2 men broke in, attacked them, fled. If you believe that, I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you. You have a business partner, Dave Sweetman, who claims he was forced to give up money, yet they find over $1,000 on him when the police arrive. You have to be kidding me. The discrepancies in the financial records, the mutual life insurance policies totaling $8 million. It is enough to make any seasoned investigator lose his temper. Nick Cordova was a man living the American dream until he realized his partner might value him more dead than alive. It is a tragedy of greed, and the fact that the family is still waiting for justice 6 years later, with redacted files and shifting stories. That is a failure of the system, plain and simple. And then you look at the case of Laura Sweetman. 13 years ago, in the winter of 2013, a doctor, a mother, a woman who sought protection from her own husband, David Sweetman, only to end up dead with a medical report that claimed her cause of death was undetermined. You have to be kidding me. A displaced gate, an unlocked back door, and a medical examiner whose record is so tainted it makes you question every single thing they ever touched. It is not just incompetence. It is an insult to the dead. The silence from law enforcement in her case is deafening. Then you turn the page to 1969, to the cold darkness that took Stephanie Casper, a teenager, bright, working at a restaurant, just trying to find her way. You find her remains near the Root River, and the way they were handled, with such chilling, surgical precision, it tells you exactly what kind of monster you are dealing with. Someone with time, someone with skill, and someone who moved through the world with enough secrecy to keep a secret for 57 years. My, investigators like Brian Van Sack have been chasing shadows for decades, and the technology keeps getting better, but the truth remains just out of reach. We had suspects, the Bartelt brothers, Wilbert Mackey, men who live with the stench of violence clinging to them. Yet we could not bridge the gap between suspicion and certainty. It is a haunting narrative of a life cut short, and it reminds you that sometimes the past refuses to stay buried. Finally, you have the case of Melissa Casillas in 2025. A mother vanishes, leaving behind a home that looks like a snapshot of a life interrupted. Phones wiped, credentials altered, and a family divided by 2 different versions of the truth. You have one side seeing a woman overwhelmed by professional pressures and debt, choosing to walk away, and the other side seeing a victim of something far more sinister. And you have the husband, Mark, a man who knows the land and the way things move, but who seems to be at odds with the people who love his wife the most. It is a digital age, and we think we're connected, but the truth is, a human being can still just vanish into thin air, and we are left with nothing but ghosts and speculation. When I look at these cases, I do not see just crime reports. I see the failures of people who we're supposed to protect. I see the darkness that hides in the hearts of those we trust. And I see families who are left with nothing but an empty chair at the dinner table. It is the same old story, time and again. We look for patterns, we look for motives, and we look for the one small detail that cracks the whole thing wide open. Because truth is a stubborn thing. It does not go away, even when people want it to. It hides in the files, It hides in the silence, and it hides in the inconsistencies that we are too tired or too scared to look at. Police work is not magic. It is hard, boring, repetitive work. It is asking the same question until the answer changes. It is walking the crime scene until you see the thing you missed the first time. It is holding the line for the victims who cannot speak for themselves. You have to be kidding me if you think it is easy. It is not. It is a grind, and it is a battle for the truth that only gets harder with every passing year. But you do it anyway. You do it because if you do not, then the monsters win. And that is something I have never been willing to accept. I asked her brother if he would step in, and of course, there were a lot of tears. She could not imagine anybody else standing in the place of her father. When the minister asked who gives this woman to be married to this man, Steve replied that he did, in the memory of his father. It was incredibly sentimental to be gathered at such a special occasion where their father was not physically present. With the passing of their father, Steve, as the brother of Rosie, became the head of the family. Though he never had children of his own, he had always been a father figure to his siblings. When the father and mother of Steve were married, Steve was only about 2 or 3 years old. He had 4 sisters, and Rosie was the youngest. He was 10 years older than her. So there was really never a moment when Steve was not in the life of Rosie. Steve was her big brother and her hero. He was everything a little girl would want in a big brother. He played football, and he wrestled in high school, and that really made him larger than life to her. After high school, Steve graduated from college with a degree in finance and quickly matured into a shrewd businessman. Steve and a partner started a company called Physical Therapy Resources, which eventually became a national company with physical therapy centers all over the country. Steve and Rosie met at work. He was in the hospital, and she was in the same hospital, and that is how they met and became friends. He was very successful and eventually sold his interests, his business, and basically from that point on, he was retired. His goal was to retire at the age of 40. He missed it by 1 year, and he retired when he was 41. Selling his business freed up Steve to do whatever he wanted, and what he wanted to do was give back. He would mentor a large group of young men, helping them start up businesses or helping them find the direction they wanted their lives to go. Steve was extremely generous with not only his resources, but also with his time. Steve always had time for his family. Rosie once filmed Steve as he teased their Uncle Max. It was special. Their dad was not so funny. He was more serious, much more serious. He was always serious. But where did that money come from? Steve? I do not know. When his sister Rosie got married, it was the good humor of Steve that made him the life and soul of the occasion. Please get up, Steve. Plate. Steve was always the first person to get up to give a toast anywhere. Hello, hello, hello. It was always ad-lib for him, from the heart. This is my way of getting away from the emotional stuff. William, thank you so much. I am not going to look at you. Thank you so much for making my sister so happy. And my dad. Steve was never one to hide his emotions. My dad told me before he passed to take care of my sister, to honor you, and he loved you very much. I have to get serious here. All right, I am cool. All right, you guys are great companions. You are great partners. And my sister, I have never seen her happier. After the speeches, Steve stepped up for the father and daughter dance. He came up, and they got ready to dance. And before the music started, they had a very, very powerful moment. A surprise recording of their dearly departed father played out. The best moment of my day was when you were climbing my knee. You would say, "Daddy, I love you." I miss those days. I really do, because I love you too. He had so many duties that day. He was a dad. He was the best man. He was the entertainment. He was the one that kept everyone calm and kept everyone laughing. He was a natural at it. Despite his success and close network of family and friends, the romantic life of Steve had been rocky. He looked for a partner that was as focused and determined and loving and caring as he was. And that is a tall order to fill. Now 52, his family figured it would take a very special person to sweep him off his feet. Rosie thought Steve was always looking for somebody on a level he could connect with emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. But 3 years later, that is exactly what happened. In late 2009, Steve decided to leave his home state of Florida for a change of pace in North Carolina. He really loved being physical. He loved walking. He loved anything to do with being outdoors. So when he moved from South Florida to North Carolina, he had the opportunity to be outdoors a lot more. Within just a few months, Steve announced that he had met someone special. He seemed to have a glow that he had been missing for a little while, and he was excited. Her name was Lana Walsh, 12 years his junior. She was a nurse who grew up in Oklahoma. She struck Rosie as being very sweet, very quiet, but very sweet. And this quiet kind of stood out because Steve was not very quiet. The personality of Steve was gigantic. She was more like a wallflower. Despite their differences, Steve was sure she was the one. They were very affectionate with each other, always arm in arm. Steve was always hugging her, squeezing her, and kissing her. Rosie felt happy for her brother. So, of course, anybody that he loved, she was going to embrace. It was not long before Steve asked Lana to move in with him. After they got to know each other quite a bit more, Steve persuaded her to come to Charlotte, and Steve could be very convincing. They added some new additions to the family. The first dog that Steve and Lana got was Guinness, an Italian greyhound. They loved the breed, so they decided that they wanted another one, and her name was Sadie. With Lana, Steve finally felt he had found his missing piece. Steve always had great things to say about her. He referred to her as his Lana Sue. He could not hide the feelings he had for her. He was very much in love with her. Rosie thought Steve found himself well grounded with Lana. She felt like Steve found a certain sense of peace with her. Steve Clayton came to North Carolina for a change from his old life and found a whole new future. When Steve Clayton danced with his sister at her wedding, he dreamed of finding his own special someone. And now, 6 years later, he was about to marry the love of his life, a Veterans Affairs nurse named Lana Walsh. It was a lovely day in November 2013. Many of the family had traveled to North Carolina just to be there and enjoy that day with him, and he made it very special for everyone. The wedding of Lana and Steve took place at their house in Charlotte. It was such a beautiful event. You could just see the love. Both of them were beaming. Soon after, the couple decided to relocate and move into their forever home, just over the border in South Carolina, on the banks of Lake Wylie. It was like something on a postcard. This gorgeous ocean blue home, sitting on a gorgeous piece of lakefront property. It was very lovely. The couple set about refurbishing their new home, decorating it with a collection of artworks and antiques of Steve. Steve was the kind of person for whom objects were very personal, and he was very proud of his possessions. They were all unique in some way. The move allowed the couple to indulge in their love of nature. If there was something fun and outdoors to do, he was going to be the first one there, and he was gung-ho about it. Their relocation to South Carolina also meant the pair were closer to the extended family of Steve. Nick French, who married a niece of Steve in 2010, officially became his nephew. They hung out with Steve and Lana a lot when they moved up there. They would go out to dinner with them. They would go to concerts. They would go to special events every holiday. They were also just a 30-minute drive from the son and grandchildren of Lana, and the pair never said no to a bit of babysitting. Steve had a way with children because Steve had always been a child at heart. He was the kind of guy who would get down on the floor and play with the kids, making noises like Pop Goes the Weasel. With the kids around, there was never a dull moment in the Clayton household. In one video, Lana filmed Steve attempting to describe the limbo while her twin granddaughters watched. He said they would make Papa do it. There's a stick, and I have to go like that, and I have to go under the stick, and I have to get real low to get under the stick. It is a game. It is a dance. These are dances. You have to tell me how to act it out. Lana was tickled, but the twins were more interested in their ice cream. Steve enjoyed playing all kinds of games, whether it was Scrabble or even a silly child's game. He would tease the children, asking if they wanted him to get in. And then he would spin the spinner and turn the handles many times. He would tell them to put their head in the thing and put their chin on the thing. He was a huge teddy bear. They loved to play with him. He always had kids hanging on him. He would ask them what number they got, and Lana was always game for some fun, too. Oh no, it is coming up. It does it every time. Here it comes, here it comes. Cheers. 5 years into their marriage, Steve and Lana appear to be thriving. But in June 2018, Steve suddenly fell ill. He said he felt dizzy, complaining of vertigo. He said that his ear hurt and that he felt nauseous. He started getting sick in the yard, and Rosie felt real bad for him. She knew that he had had issues with vertigo prior to this. He said he had been very ill and did not know exactly what was wrong. He just remembered that he was working out in the garden, and he started to feel dizzy, a little nauseous, a little dizzy, and had a headache. He thought that maybe he had gotten sunstroke. Lana asked if he was okay, and he said yes. As a nurse, Lana thought the best thing for Steve was bed rest. He said he remembered laying down, and he said the next time he opened his eyes, 36 hours had passed. Worried, Rosie called Lana to see if she could explain the mystery illness of Steve. She asked her what she thought was going on because that is very odd for any person of any age to lose 36 hours of time. And she said that he was fine and that she was watching him and she was making sure he was okay. Though he had never been ill like this before, Lana thought that Steve was just exhausted. Rosie felt reassured that Lana was there to take care of him in any way that she could, especially with her knowledge as a nurse. It seemed the larger-than-life energy of Steve was starting to catch up with him. But just 2 weeks later, it appeared the treatment of Lana had worked. Steve was back to his old self, throwing a party for the 4th of July. That party was just as great as every other party they had been to there. Steve was his normal, affectionate self. Everybody had a great time. There is Steve dancing with Lana as they celebrate in style. He grabbed Lana right away, and the family just kind of followed suit and all joined in. Rosie remembered watching them hug and him kiss her, and they were completely in love. Things were good at the Clayton home, and no one doubted that the lives of Lana and Steve were going to be happy and long. On July 21st, 2018, a call came into York County 911. Police units arrived on scene and body cam footage recorded by responding Officer Sergeant Day captured what they found. As they walked in the front door, there was Steve right at the bottom of this grand staircase. And unfortunately at that point, he was gone. He was dead. You could hear him kind of whispering and talking in low voices. That was because Lana Clayton was just around the corner, distraught and crying. So they did not want to say anything that was disturbing to her. Sergeant Day needed to talk with the wife of Steve, Lana, to find out what had happened. He introduced himself, telling her he would be there for just a little while until the coroner got there for transporting those things. Lana was fine, saying it felt good to her to stand if she was not making him uncomfortable. Lana told Sergeant Day that Steve had been suffering dizziness for 2 days. Stephen had been very ill with vertigo. She said she had found him Thursday morning, that he stood up, got very dizzy and collapsed, and that she had to help him upstairs. And since that time, he had not been back downstairs. The officer asked if she was working outside, and she said she was mowing the lawn real quick, and when she came in, she fell down. She said she was so sorry that she tried to take a blanket underneath him, but she could not. Despite her training, Lana was unable to render aid to Steve. That was when she really panicked because she knew she could not do anything further to help him. And so she immediately ran out when she heard the motorcycle coming by to wave someone down to call 911. The nephew, Nick French, was on duty as a police officer when he got the news. His mom called, and she said that Uncle Steve died, and it was just kind of disbelief. He knew it was for real, but it did not really sink in. So he got down there as quick as he could. He just remembered the whole time going through his head was, how, why? The phone rang, and Rosie saw that it was her nephew calling. He said, Uncle Steve died, Uncle Steve died. That was not possible. It was not possible. How could he be gone? No, she could not believe it. With Rosie 700 miles away, Nick and his family rallied around Lana. He felt awful because he knew she loved Uncle Steve, and he just kept thinking that he was upset right now, but he could not imagine what she was going through to find her husband on the ground like this. Lana feared that the vertigo of Steve could have caused a fall down the stairs. She kept saying that she thought he fell down the stairs and that it was horrible, and she hoped he did not. Sergeant Day checked for any signs that Steve may have been attacked. This looked like it was probably a natural death, but you never knew. So Sergeant Day did at that point go upstairs to look to see what had happened. That would be a little unnerving to just go through a labyrinth of a house that you had never seen before, because you never know what could be around the corner. You could tell that there did not appear to be a sign of struggle. No other signs of someone else being up there having done something to him. Nothing significant at all. In the master bedroom, the bed sheet was all rumpled up, but nothing to suggest Steve had any kind of struggle. It looked as if the cause of death would not be a mystery for the coroner. The coroner could not see any contusions or bruises. Nothing suggested Steve fell down the staircase. It looked as though Steve made it to the bottom of the stairs and then collapsed. The coroner said she believed he had a heart attack. Rosie asked what led her to that opinion, and she said that the coloration of his face was a clue. There was blueness that went across the top of the chest, almost in a line, and that oftentimes, according to the coroner, was an indication that he may have had a heart attack. Back in the living room, Sergeant Day told Lana what they thought had happened when he walked to the top of the stairs. He noticed that the carpet on the staircase kind of had a direction to it, so he could see footprints. He thought he may have come to the bottom of the staircase. He told her not to dwell on the staircase because he knew that was a hard claim to make. He did not know how he made it. He did not know what he was thinking. He thought this was the day God chose. That was what she told him. While Lana digested the news, Nick and his family helped with cleaning up. They wanted to make the house still comfortable enough for her. They knew she was going to be exhausted, and she had to spend the night there. But they were shocked at what they found in the bedroom. When they went upstairs, Nick immediately noticed a smell. It was a smell of human filth, excrement, and urine. So they looked around, and there were huge urine discoloration spots in the middle of the bed. The soiled mattress raised some questions. Nick thought about the amount of urine that it would take to soak through that mattress. Steve had to have been going to the bathroom in this bed for days. So they immediately thought they had to get this mattress out of the room. They could barely pick it up. It was extremely heavy. They took the mattress, and they tossed out of the house. When Rosie talked with Lana on the phone, she asked her how Steve got so ill. When she spoke with Lana much later in that evening, she asked her what happened, and she said he had not been feeling well for a few days. And she asked why she did not call somebody, why she did not let somebody know. And she said that he was starting to feel better. She said Steve never called because he had been sleeping heavily and misplaced his cell phone a week earlier. Lana claimed that it had been missing for several days. The brother of Rosie was never, ever without his phone. He was just always attached to his phone. It went everywhere with him. It was at that point where she really felt like something very sinister was going on, and she did not know what it was. The sister of Steve, Rosie, asked his widow, Lana, about his will. Steve and Rosie had talked many times about what it was that he wanted to do when that time came, and he wanted to be buried in that beautiful cemetery in Fort Lauderdale. When she asked Lana, she said there was no will. Lana had already made the arrangements. Steve was due to be cremated, and she was planning his memorial. On August 4th, 2018, Lana held a service for Steve at their home. It was highly emotional. Everybody there felt such a deep connection to Steve. It was just hard to stay calm, even though it was supposed to be a celebration of his life. It just could not help but feel the deep, deep sorrow that everybody felt. If there was any space that it was okay to be sad and to cry a little bit, this was that time. And Rosie thought that it was okay that day that they celebrate a life well lived and at the same time be sad. At the memorial, Rosie and the family were surprised to find Lana had already started to clear out the belongings of Steve. She had already began taking all of his clothes, all of his personal items, and she donated them all to the Veterans Affairs. Rosie was almost knocked off her feet to see the number of hangers. Empty hangers in that closet with not a single stitch of clothes. A lot of watches were missing. A lot of jewelry was missing. His wedding ring was missing. And the claims of Lana about Steve not having will raise further suspicions. That was something that Steve and Steve and many other people had discussed, was how important it was to make sure that everything was in order. There was absolutely no logic in her brother, an accountant, a person who was meticulous with his finances, not having a will. The family felt like something was not adding up. They were all on the same page there. They knew something was going on. And that was when they called the medical examiner's office and said to please do an autopsy. And at the very least, if they were not going to do that, to do a toxicology. And they agreed to it. Detective Motes of the York County Sheriff's Office was also notified of the suspicions of the family about the death of Steve. But when the autopsy report came in, it listed signs of heart disease and pointed to death by natural causes. The initial autopsy still showed that it was likely a heart attack, but they had to wait for the toxicologist's report to come back to finally make an actual finding. It would take a few weeks before those results arrived. So they waited on pins and needles for the truth to come out. They just knew that there was something was very wrong. When the toxicology report on the blood of Steve Clayton came back, it was shocking. It showed traces of several sedatives, including marijuana, temazepam, and Benadryl. But that was not all. The biggest shock in the toxicology results was tetrahydrozoline, also known as THC. It is the active ingredient in eye drops like Visine, Murine, or other over-the-counter eye drops. Tetrahydrozoline is not ever meant to be ingested. Given in small doses, it makes you feel very ill. It makes you nauseous. It makes you dizzy. It will make you pass out eventually. But in large quantities, it is deadly. It shuts your central nervous system down, and it will kill you. The detectives learned that tetrahydrozoline could limit the blood supply to vital organs, leading to a heart attack. When the body cam went up there, the Visine that you saw was on the tall dresser that was away from the bed. That was where he could not get up to get the Visine. Now it was very clear. This was not a natural death. Detective Motes needed to have a talk with Lana Clayton. 5 weeks after the sudden death of her husband, Lana Clayton was questioned by detectives. They wanted to know more about the medications found in the blood of Steve. They asked her what he would say, and she said he took Benadryl. It was a long list, but there was no mention of tetrahydrozoline, the drug that killed Steve. It is colorless, it is odorless, and it is tasteless, which makes it the perfect thing to give to someone if you want to poison them. The level of tetrahydrozoline in the blood of Steve was so high that it was clear that it was the cause of death. It is a lethal level, no matter what way you look at it. The detectives pressed on. Somehow or another, there was a large amount of Visine in his system. So that was what they were trying to get to the bottom of. The detectives asked what she knew about it, and she said she knew it makes you a diarrhea. There were basically two things that the police were now considering. 1, he was poisoned. There was foul play. 2, he ingested it on his own, whether it was intentional or unintentional. But as police probed the relationship of Steve and Lana, they asked how her life had been. She said that sometimes they would have fun and everything, and then sometimes she would be on eggshells. All the time she was on eggshells. Lana claimed that Steve had a dark side. She said he could be really nasty. They asked what nasty Steve looked like, and she said he was really verbally abusive, calling her names. When they asked what he would call her, she said she did not know. Stupid, bitch, just all kind of things. She said she could see it escalating until she would just try and stay out of his way. After the interview with Lana, detectives ordered a search of the house. They were looking for cups or glasses that had a residue in them. They were looking for anything they could find that helped them determine what could have caused this. Anything document-wise that would show trouble in the marriage. But during that time, Lana told the officer that she wanted to speak again with Detective Motes. Detective Moats recorded what Lana had to say. She told him a little bit about Stephen, that it was worse than what she told him. She said he was verbally and physically abusive. She claimed he would yell at her and call her names and that his anger built up. She would do something that would irritate him until the point where he would explode. She explained that after he had that incident, which he said was vertigo, and she was taking care of him and everything, she was still so angry. And her girlfriend at work told her that if you want to get even with somebody, you should put Visine in a drink because it will cause diarrhea. It was then that Lana dropped a bombshell. When she saw that Visine on the table, it just came back to her, and she just took and squirted it. When the detective asked what she squirted it into, she said his water. So you did not know the full amount. I mean, you just squeezed, the detective asked. She said she thought she put the whole thing in. The whole bottle? I think I did. I squeezed it hard. I just saw it there and I just did it. When the detective asked what her plans were for that night, she said just to stay there. He told her she would be okay, that he knew it was a lot on her plate. She asked, just what if I do? What if I cause his death with the Visine? Anything else that you want to add? No. If there is more, get it off your chest. That is it. It was a damning confession. But the detectives could not arrest Lana just yet. After Lana confessed, the police left. They got their ducks in a row as far as what charges would be made. And they were ready to come back the next day to arrest Lana Clayton. But early that morning, they got a call from one of the neighbors of Lana. They found notes of suicide. They were afraid that she had harmed herself. She knew the police were coming back the next day, and she knew they would have warrants for arrest. She turned the gas on and went upstairs and took some pills to kill herself. They found her unconscious in her bed. She was taken into the hospital where she was treated and ultimately released, and then immediately arrested on the charges of murder and tampering with food items. The family was informed of the arrest of Lana. A detective from York County called Rosie and said, "Hey, I just want to bring you up to speed here." Lana confessed, and Rosie pulled over right away. It hit her like a ton of bricks, literally like a baseball bat to the face. She answered the phone, and Rosie was on the other end screaming that she killed him. On January 16th, 2020, Lana accepted a plea deal and admitted guilt on charges of voluntary manslaughter and tampering with a drug or food product. The original indictment was for murder. She was pleading to a lesser offense, voluntary manslaughter. Lana claimed her own knowledge of the drug was by watching movies and the cause of discomfort and diarrhea. Lana insisted she never intended for Steve to die and just wanted revenge for his abuse. But his friends and family did not buy that. Steve was ever abusive. She tried to assassinate the character of Steve because other people who knew him and who he had. Menard came forward to say he was a wonderful person. There was no abuse of any sort with Stephen. She was trying to do whatever she could to save herself from a very, very, very long sentence and possibly the death penalty. But he was a gentle soul, not capable of harming someone. Based on the toxicology report, the prosecutors believe Steve suffered for 3 days before dying. Lana told them that the fatal dose was on Thursday morning, but they knew as a matter of scientific fact from the toxicologist that it was impossible. He would have died Thursday morning if he had ingested that Thursday morning. For him to have been sick all of that time, it indicated that she continually gave him medication throughout that time, poisoning him with Visine little by little. And Lana, a nurse, never sought to help him after the initial poisoning. Stephen would not have stayed in a urine-soaked mattress. He was a clean freak. He would not have stood for such a thing. He was too weak to get up and move. There was no phone in the house. There was no landline, so he could not call somebody. So this put him in the situation of being tortured with no way to get help. And so finally she knew Saturday that was it. And she squeezed a whole bottle of Visine into his water, had him drink it, and then went out to mow the grass, so she did not have to watch the horror of his death. Instead of a nurse that helps, she was the nurse from hell. 53-year-old Lana Clayton was sentenced to 25 years in prison. She never admitted that she intended to kill Steve, but the facts showed otherwise. Rosie felt like there was no penalty that would have been great enough for Lana. This was 3 days of methodically poisoning the best friend of Rosie and then killing him. The thought process that had to go into her putting on this charade. And she carried that right on through till the end. And Rosie thought that was the definition of a monster. But Lana almost got away with it. There almost was not an autopsy. If there had not been an autopsy, the ruling of the coroner would have been that this was likely a heart episode, and it was natural causes. The truth was she did this to herself, you know. Had she been just the same quiet, gentle Lana grieving the loss of Steve, no one would have had any suspicion whatsoever. Although Lana insisted the death of Steve was unintentional. His family and the prosecution believed it was a deliberate act motivated by financial gain. One obvious and glaring motive was the wealth of Steve. Without a will in the state of South Carolina, everything goes to the spouse. So Lana would know that if Steve was gone, she got everything. If somebody wanted to do something malicious like this, all they had to do was get rid of the will, and everything belonged to them. The family tried to move on without Steve in their lives. Hello, hello, hello. Rosie said she missed a lot about Steve, but she missed his voice. She missed hearing his voice. This was her way of getting away from the emotional stuff. She thought what she missed about Steve was his over-the-top personality, this big, boisterous, gregarious character that entered the room and just took over everything. Steve was an amazing person. It has been difficult not having him around. The thing she missed the most about Steve was his laughter and his ability to light up a room. Stephen was stolen from everyone who loved him. Stephen was stolen from everyone who loved him. This is a story of a man whose presence was as large as his heart. A successful and generous businessman who navigated the complexities of life with infectious enthusiasm. His name was Steve Clayton, and to those who knew him, he was far more than just an entrepreneur or a brother. He was the beating heart of his family. He was a man who greeted the world with a resounding hello, 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 an opening line that served as a signature of his warmth and his unwavering commitment to connection. Steve was born into a loving family, the kind of older brother who defined the role with grace and strength. He had 4 sisters, and he was the youngest, 10 years older than the one who would become his greatest advocate, his sister, Rosie. Their bond was deep, rooted in the shared history of a close-knit family. Steve, with his athletic frame and bright mind, was a hero to his younger siblings. He was the one who wrestled in high school, who excelled in football, and who, after graduation, turned his formidable intellect toward the world of finance. His career was marked by the same dedication he applied to every aspect of his life. Steve, along with a business partner, founded a company called Physical Therapy Resources. Through sheer hard work and a keen business sense, that company grew into a national enterprise, with centers spread across the country. It was a career that allowed him to achieve his goal of retiring by the age of 41, just 1 year later than he had initially planned. But retirement for Steve was never about idleness. It was about the freedom to give back. He became a mentor, guiding young men as they navigated the daunting task of starting their own businesses or finding their path in life. He was generous with his resources, but more importantly, he was generous with his time. In the year 2007, on the 10th of March, Steve played a pivotal role in the life of his sister, Rosie. It was her wedding day in Miami, a day of immense joy, yet one tinge of the sadness of their father, who had passed away 11 months prior. Steve stepped in, taking on the mantle of the father figure he had always been to his siblings. He walked Rosie down the aisle, his heart open and his emotions raw. When the officiant asked who gave the bride to be married to the man, Steve responded with deep conviction that he did so in the memory of their father. That day, Steve was everything: the brother, the surrogate father, the master of ceremonies, and the entertainer who kept spirits high and the laughter flowing. During the reception, when a surprise recording of their father played, Steve stood by his sister, anchoring her with his strength. Despite his success and the richness of his personal life, Steve had long been searching for a romantic partner who could match his intensity, his focus, and his capacity for love. He wanted someone with whom he could connect emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. For years, this remained an elusive goal. But in the late months of 2009, a change of pace beckoned. Steve decided to leave his home state of Florida and move to North Carolina, a place that offered him the outdoorsy lifestyle he craved. It was in this new chapter that he met Lana Walsh, a nurse who was 12 years his junior. Lana seemed to be the opposite of the boisterous, gregarious Steve. She was quiet, almost a wallflower, which stood in stark contrast to Steve's gigantic personality. Yet, their differences seemed to complement one another. Steve was enchanted. He began to glow with a happiness he had been missing for some time. He couldn't hide his feelings. He was completely enamored with her, calling her his Lana Sue. The couple became inseparable, constantly arm in arm, and it was not long before Steve persuaded her to move in with him. Their life together was enriched by the addition of their dogs, Guinness and Sadie, which brought a new kind of joy to their household. In November of 2013, Steve and Lana married at their home in Charlotte. It was a beautiful, intimate event, a day that signaled the beginning of their life together as a husband and wife. Shortly after the wedding, the couple made the decision to relocate once again, moving to a picturesque home on the banks of Lake Wylie, just over the border in South Carolina. It was a stunning property, a place where they could indulge in their love for nature. They spent time refurbishing the house, filling it with the antiques and artwork Steve cherished. The move also brought them closer to Steve's extended family. His niece and her husband moved to the area, and they became a fixture in each other's lives. They shared dinners, attended concerts, and celebrated holidays together. Steve, ever the child at heart, was the favorite relative among the children. He loved to get down on the floor to play games, to teach them how to do the limbo, or to engage in the simple, silly amusements that define childhood. He was a teddy bear of a man, always ready to share a laugh or a tender moment. For 5 years, their life on the lake appeared to be a picture of domestic bliss. But in June of 2018, the rhythm of their life was shattered. Steve, a man of vitality, suddenly fell ill. He complained of vertigo, dizziness, and nausea. He recounted a terrifying experience while working in the garden, where he felt as though he had suffered from severe sunstroke. He remembered laying down, only to wake up 36 hours later, disoriented and confused. His sister, Rosie, was deeply concerned, but she took comfort in the fact that Lana, a trained nurse, was by his side to care for him. She assumed that Steve's body was simply catching up with him, that he was exhausted from his energetic lifestyle. Remarkably, just 2 weeks later, Steve seemed to have recovered. He hosted a party for the 4th of July, a celebration that was as joyous and spirited as all the gatherings he had hosted before. He was his usual affectionate self, dancing with Lana and embracing his family. No one could have suspected that beneath this facade of normalcy, a dark cloud was gathering. On July 21st, 2018, the peace of the Clayton household was permanently broken. A call was made to 911 in York County. Police arrived to find the scene of a tragedy. Steve had been found at the bottom of the grand staircase, his life extinguished. When the responding officer, Sergeant Day, arrived, he found Lana in a state of distress. She explained that Steve had been ill with vertigo for days, that he had collapsed, and that she had been unable to assist him. She was distraught, and the atmosphere was one of profound shock. The initial investigation suggested a natural death. The coroner, observing a mysterious discoloration across his chest, speculated that it could have been a heart attack. There were no signs of a struggle, no evidence of foul play in the immediate environment. Steve's nephew, Nick, was the first of the family to receive the news, a moment of disbelief that would haunt him forever. The news devastated the family. They were 700 miles away, helpless and heartbroken. However, as the days passed, inconsistencies began to emerge. When the family visited the home, they were struck by a horrifying reality. The bedroom, The place where Steve had supposedly been resting was in a state of neglect. There were large, heavy spots of urine discoloration on the mattress, a sign that someone had been living in filth for days. For a man as meticulous and clean as Steve, this was inconceivable. He would never have allowed himself to exist in such a state. Furthermore, his cell phone, an object that was always attached to his hand, had supposedly been missing for a week, a claim that made no sense to those who knew his habits. The family's intuition, fueled by these red flags, led them to push for an autopsy. They felt that something was profoundly wrong. When the toxicologist's report finally arrived, it shattered any illusion of a natural death. The report revealed the presence of several sedatives, including marijuana, temazepam, and Benadryl. But most chilling was the presence of tetrahydrozoline, the active ingredient found in eye drops. This substance, while harmless in small topical doses, is lethal when ingested. It restricts blood supply to vital organs and can lead to a heart attack. The detectives confronted Lana with this information. At first, she attempted to deflect, claiming Steve was abusive and verbally nasty, painting a picture of a difficult marriage to justify her circumstances. But as the investigation deepened, the truth began to surface. During a subsequent interview, Lana confessed. She admitted that she had been angry, that a friend had suggested the use of eye drops to cause diarrhea, and that she had administered them to Steve. She confessed to squeezing an entire bottle into his water. It was a devastating admission, one that revealed a calculated and cold act of betrayal against a man who had loved her deeply. Following the confession, the situation took a tragic turn. Aware that the police were closing in, Lana attempted to take her own life, turning on the gas and taking pills. She was found, hospitalized, and upon her release, immediately arrested for the murder and the tampering of food items. The news of her arrest hit the family with the force of a physical blow. Their beloved Steve had been murdered by the woman he had trusted with his life. In January of 2020, Lana accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to charges of voluntary manslaughter and tampering with a food product. She insisted that she never intended for Steve to die, that she only wanted to cause him discomfort as a form of revenge for the abuse she alleged she had subjected her to. The family, however, knew better. They knew Steve, they knew his character, and they rejected the false narrative she attempted to weave to save herself. They knew that he had been systematically poisoned over the course of 3 days, forced to suffer in silence while his wife, a trained nurse, watched and did nothing to help him. She had denied him medical care. She had let him languish in a urine-soaked bed, and she had ultimately delivered the fatal dose before going outside to mow the grass. Lana Clayton was sentenced to 25 years in prison. It was a sentence that the family felt was insufficient for the brutality of her crime, yet it provided a measure of justice. The motive, clear and cold, was financial. Without a will, the assets of the deceased in South Carolina passed directly to the spouse. Lana knew this. She had cleared out the house, donated his clothes, and erased the traces of his life with chilling efficiency. In the aftermath, the family struggled to fill the void left by Steve. They mourned not just a brother, an uncle, and a friend, but a force of nature who had made the world a brighter place. They missed his voice, his boisterous laugh, his ability to enter a room and make everyone feel seen and valued. They remembered the mentor who had guided young men, the father figure who had walked his sister down the aisle, and the man who had loved with his whole heart. Steve Clayton's life was defined by generosity, by love, and by a relentless pursuit of joy. His death was a tragedy, a stark reminder of the hidden darkness that can sometimes exist in the most unexpected places. Yet, his legacy endured in the lives of the people he had touched. He was a man who had built a successful life from the ground up, who had shared his success with others, and who had left a mark of kindness on everyone he encountered. Though he was stolen from those who loved him, the memory of his warmth, his smile, and that signature greeting, hello, 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 remained a beacon of light that no darkness could ever fully extinguish. The story of Steve Clayton became a testament to the enduring power of a life well lived, and a solemn reminder to cherish the ones we love while they are still here. For life is a fragile and precious gift, one that should never be taken for granted. The family eventually found a way to carry his memory forward, keeping his spirit alive through the stories they told and the love they continued to share for one another. They honored him by continuing to be the generous, loving people he had raised him to be, ensuring that his influence would ripple through the generations to come. In the quiet moments by the lake, they would sometimes sit and listen to the water, remembering the man who had brought so much laughter, so much wisdom, and so much love into their world. And in those moments, they knew that even though he was gone, he was never truly lost. He was, and always would be, the hero of their story. The sun was shining brightly over the city of Miami on the 10th of March in the year 2007. It was a day of profound significance, a milestone that would be etched into memories of the Clayton family for all the years to follow. The air was thick with the scent of tropical flowers and the palpable hum of excitement. For today was the day that Rosemary Clayton, known to all as Rosie, would join her life with that of William Leslie. It was a union that felt like destiny, a celebration of love that radiated warmth and joy, though it was tinged with the soft, lingering sadness of a recent loss. Only 11 months prior to this joyous occasion, the family had bid farewell to their patriarch, a man whose presence had been the foundation of their lives. Standing beside the bride, ready to walk her down the aisle, was Steve Clayton, the eldest brother of the family, at 52 years of age. Steve carried himself with the grace and authority of a man who had long acted as the head of the family. He wore his suit with a sense of pride that seemed to amplify his natural charisma. When Rosie had asked him to take their father's place and give her away, he had accepted without hesitation, though his eyes were bright with the tears of a man who cherished his siblings above all else. For Rosie, there could be no other choice. Steve had been a constant force in her life, a hero who had wrestled in high school, played football with the vigor of a champion, and grown into a man of immense character and achievement. The history of the Clayton siblings was one of closeness and mutual support. Steve, born 10 years before the youngest, Rosie, had always been the big brother who seemed larger than life. When their father and mother were married, Steve was but a toddler, a tiny observer of the beginnings of his family. He had watched over his 4 sisters with protective devotion that never wavered as they grew into adulthood. After graduating from college with a degree in finance, Steve had quickly matured into a shrewd and successful businessman. He did not chase fame for the sake of it, but rather built a company called Physical Therapy Resources, which eventually blossomed into a national organization. His clinics spanned the country, providing care and healing to thousands, a testament to his drive and his desire to make a tangible difference in the world. Steve and Rosie met as friends, having crossed paths within the walls of a hospital where they were both spending time. It was a serendipitous beginning to a lifelong bond of friendship that grew alongside their sibling relationship. Steve had a plan for his life, a goal that he pursued with the same dedication he applied to his business. He aimed to retire at the age of 40, and though he missed his target by a single year, retiring at 41, he did so with the satisfaction of a man who had succeeded on his own terms. Selling his business did not mean Steve would sit idle. Quite the opposite. It freed him to pursue his true passion, which was to give back to others. He became a mentor to a multitude of young men, helping them navigate the complexities of starting a business or finding the right direction for their own lives. He was not only generous with his financial resources, but more importantly, with his time. At the wedding of his sister, Steve was the heart of the celebration. When the time came for the speeches, he did not need notes. He stood up, as he often did, the first man to volunteer for the task, and greeted the room with his signature, cheerful hello, hello, hello. It was an impromptu performance, delivered from the depths of his generous heart. He spoke to William, expressing his gratitude for the happiness he had brought to Rosie, and he spoke of their father, ensuring that the memory of the man they had lost was woven into the fabric of the day. There was even a surprise recording of their late father that played, a moment of profound emotion that left not a dry eye in the house. Steve was the glue, the comedian, the solemn protector, and the life of the party, all rolled into one. Despite his external success, Steve's romantic life had been a path of searching. He sought a partner who could match his focus, his determination, and his deeply caring nature. It was, he often thought, a tall order to fill. He needed someone with whom he could connect emotionally, intellectually, and spiritually. For years, he remained a dedicated brother, the successful mentor, and the beloved uncle, still waiting for that missing piece of his own heart. The change came in late 2009, seeking a shift in pace. Steve decided to leave the familiar sunshine of Florida and move to North Carolina. He loved the outdoors, the act of walking, and the physical vitality that came with being closer to nature. It was in this new chapter that he met Lana Walsh. She was 12 years his junior, a nurse who had grown up in Oklahoma. To those who met her, she appeared quiet, perhaps even a bit of a wallflower, which stood in stark contrast to Steve's gigantic, boisterous personality. Yet, to Steve, she was the person he had been waiting for. They were affectionate, constantly walking arm in arm, with Steve frequently hugging and kissing her, basking in the glow of a connection he had finally found. He began to call her his Lana Sue, a term of endearment that reflected his deep, unwavering love. She moved to Charlotte to be with him, and together they expanded their family, adding 2 Italian greyhounds, Guinness and Sadie, to their household. Steve, who had always been a child of heart, found joy in the simple domesticity of his life with Lana. He played games, he babysat the grandchildren, and he seemed to have finally found a sense of peace. In November 2013, they were married at their home in Charlotte. It was a beautiful, intimate event where friends and family gathered to witness the love that had transformed Steve's life. Shortly thereafter, the couple moved to a picturesque home on the banks of Lake Wylie, just over the border in South Carolina. It was a property that looked like it had been lifted from a postcard, with its ocean blue exterior and prime waterfront views. They spent their days decorating the space with Steve's collection of antiques and art, indulging in their shared love of the outdoors and staying close to family. They would host dinners, attend concerts, and gather for holidays, creating a life that seemed to be the definition of contentment. Life continued in this vein for several years, with Steve playing the part of the devoted husband and the playful uncle to Lana's grandchildren. He would get down on the floor to play games, pretending to limbo or spinning the wheels of board games with infectious enthusiasm. To the outside observer, the Claytons were a couple who had found their forever. The harmony began to fracture in June of 2018. Steve, a man who was rarely ill, suddenly complained of vertigo, nausea, and dizziness. He was working in his garden when the symptoms struck, causing him to feel as though he had suffered from sunstroke. As a nurse, Lana took charge of his care, advising him to rest. He remembered lying down, and the next thing he knew, 36 hours had passed. When his sister, Rosie, called to check on him, she was told that he was merely exhausted. She felt a sense of relief knowing that a professional like Lana was by his side, providing the care he needed. By early July, the incident seemed like a fading memory. Steve was back to his vibrant self, hosting a 4th of July party that was as lively and joyous as any gathering he had ever organized. He was dancing with Lana, hugging her, and showing no signs of the sickness that had struck just weeks before. Everyone who attended the party left with the impression that life at the Clayton home was once again perfect. The peace was shattered on the 21st of July, 2018. A call was placed to the York County Emergency Services. When law enforcement officers arrived, they found Steve Clayton unresponsive at the base of the staircase in his beautiful lakefront home. It was a scene of sudden, inexplicable tragedy. Lana was found nearby, distraught, telling the officers that Steve had been struggling with dizziness for days, that he had collapsed, and that she had tried to assist him. The death of Steve Clayton sent a shockwave through his family. His nephew, Nick, received a call and could not fathom the reality of his uncle's passing. It was impossible. A man like Steve, full of life and vigor, did not simply disappear. When the family gathered to support Lana, they were met with a series of confusing details. The house, usually a place of warmth and cleanliness, felt heavy. When they went to master bedroom to help with the arrangements, they were struck by an odor of neglect. The mattress was stained and ruined, suggesting that Steve had been confined to bed, unable to care for his own basic needs for days. This revelation sat uneasily with his family. Steve was a man of meticulous habits. He would never have permitted himself to live in such a state. Suspicion began to gnaw at the family. They learned that Lana had no will for Steve, which struck them as fundamentally illogical given Steve's background in finance and his habit of organizing his affairs. They discovered that Lana had begun to clear out Steve's belongings almost immediately, donating his clothes and jewelry, leaving empty hangers where his life's possessions had once hung. The family reached out to the medical examiner, requesting an autopsy and toxicology report, driven by a deep-seated feeling that something was fundamentally wrong. The initial autopsy pointed toward natural causes, a heart attack, but the family waited on pins and needles for the toxicology results. When the report finally returned, it was not the heart attack they had been told to expect. Instead, it revealed the presence of several substances in Steve's system, including marijuana, temazepam, and most shockingly, tetrahydrozoline. This compound, the active ingredient in over-the-counter eye drops like Visine, was not meant for human consumption. In small doses, it caused illness, but in the quantities found in Steve's blood, it was a lethal poison that shut down the central nervous system. The investigators realized the horror of what had occurred. This was not a natural death. It was a poisoning. The eye drops had been administered repeatedly, a slow and agonizing process that kept Steve incapacitated and unable to seek help. The realization that Lana, a nurse, had watched him suffer without calling for aid transformed the tragedy into something much darker. Lana Clayton was eventually questioned by detectives. She claimed that Steve had been verbally and physically abusive, painting a picture of a man entirely at odds with the person his friends and family had known. She claimed she had only wanted to get even, to give him a little bit of eye drops to cause stomach issues, not death. She confessed to pouring the contents of a bottle into his water. Following her confession and a failed attempt at suicide when she realized the police were closing in, Lana was taken into custody. She was charged with murder and tampering with food items. In the legal proceedings that followed, she entered a plea to voluntary manslaughter. Her defense of abuse was rejected by those who knew Steve, who described him as a gentle soul, a man incapable of such cruelty. The prosecution presented the evidence of the prolonged poisoning, a slow torture that spanned days, proving that the death was not an accident but a calculated act. Lana Clayton was sentenced to 25 years in prison. For the family, the sentence could never truly compensate for the loss of a man who had been the pillar of their lives. They mourned the loss of his voice, his laughter, and his ability to light up a room. Steve Clayton was a man who had dedicated his life to helping others, only to have his life taken by someone he had loved and trusted. In the end, the story of Steve Clayton serves as a somber reminder of the fragility of life and the importance of cherishing those we hold dear. His legacy is not in the tragedy of his death, but in the memory of the man who stood up at his sister's wedding and greeted the world with a bright, enthusiastic hello, who mentored the young, who loved his family, and who lived a life of generosity and light. Though he was stolen from those who loved him, his spirit remains in the stories of his kindness, his laughter, and the indelible mark he left on the hearts of all who knew him. Hello, hello, hello. This is how the life of Steve Clayton began for many of those who knew him, a cheerful, booming greeting that promised laughter, warmth, and the arrival of a man who was larger than life. Steve was a successful and generous businessman, a man who had built his world on the foundations of hard work, mentorship, and an unending capacity to give back. He was the kind of person who could walk into a room and immediately elevate the energy, making everyone feel seen, heard, and appreciated. The story begins on a beautiful day, March 10th, 2007 in Miami. It was a day of celebration. A moment frozen in time where the air was thick with the scent of jasmine and the collective joy of two families becoming one. It was a wedding day of Rosemary Clayton, Steve's sister, and the man she loved, William Leslie. Steve, who was 52 years old at the time, stood proudly by her side, not just as a brother, but as a pillar of strength. 11 months prior to that wedding, the family had suffered a profound loss when they said goodbye to their father. In that moment of vulnerability, Steve had stepped in to fill the void. He was the one who walked his sister down the aisle, the one who stepped into the shoes of the patriarch to honor the memory of the man they all loved so dearly. As he looked at his sister, his eyes shimmering with tears, he spoke from the heart. He was not just a businessman in that moment. He was a son honoring his father and a brother cherishing his sister. Steve had always been this way. Being 10 years older than his youngest sister, he had never known a life without the responsibility of being the big brother. He was a hero in the eyes of his younger siblings, the one who played football, the one who phone call to the local medical examiner's office. They practically begged the officials, saying, "Hey, please do a full, comprehensive autopsy on his body before it is too late." They pleaded that at the very, very least, if the county was not going to authorize a full autopsy, they must absolutely run a complete, thorough toxicology panel on his blood, facing the united front of a concerned family. The medical examiner generously agreed to halt the cremation and proceed with the requested tests. Simultaneously, a sharp investigator named Detective Motes of the York County Sheriff's Office was also officially notified of the family as growing. Vocal suspicions regarding the bizarre circumstances surrounding Steve's sudden death. He stepped into the case with a polite good morning to everybody, bringing a calm, professional eye to the tragedy. But when the initial findings from the autopsy report finally came into the station, it seemingly dashed the family as theories. The preliminary paperwork listed standard signs of underlying heart disease and pointed confidently to a tragic death caused entirely by natural causes. The medical professionals noted that the initial physical autopsy still strongly showed that it was highly likely the man had suffered a massive, fatal heart attack. However, the diligent detectives knew that they still had to wait patiently for the highly detailed toxicologist's report to come back from the state lab to finally make a definitive, actual, legally binding finding. They were warned it would take a few agonizing weeks before those complex chemical results would arrive. So, the family and the detectives waited on absolute pins and needles for the ultimate truth to finally come out into the light. Through all the waiting, the family held strong to their belief. They just knew that there was something deeply, terribly wrong. When the final comprehensive toxicology report on Steve Clayton's blood finally came back to the detective's desk, the results were absolutely shocking. The chemical analysis clearly showed the undeniable traces of several strong sedatives swimming in his system. The list included substances like marijuana, powerful prescription sleep aids, and heavy doses of allergy medication. But as concerning as those sedatives were, that was not all the lab found. The single biggest, most terrifying shock buried in the detailed toxicology results was the massive presence of a chemical compound called tetrahydrozoline. In medical circles, it is commonly known by its abbreviation, but it is universally recognized as the active, key ingredient found in standard over-the-counter eye drops. It is a soothing chemical found in common little plastic bottles sitting in medicine cabinets across the country. This specific chemical is absolutely not ever meant to be safely ingested by a human being. The medical experts explained to the horrified detectives that if it is secretly given to someone in very small doses, it makes the unsuspecting victim feel intensely, violently ill. It makes the person incredibly nauseous. It makes them terribly dizzy and disoriented. It will systematically make them pass out eventually as their blood pressure plummets. But when it is maliciously administered in large, concentrated quantities, it is highly, undeniably deadly. It forcefully shuts your entire central nervous system down. And without immediate medical intervention, it will kill you. The detectives further learned from the medical experts that the specific chemical acts quickly to drastically limit the vital blood supply flowing to the heart and other critical organs. This sudden, massive restriction is exactly what leads directly to a catastrophic heart attack. Suddenly, the initial coroner's physical findings made perfect, terrifying sense. The detectives quickly pulled up the archive body camera footage from the terrible morning of the death. When the digital video panned around the upstairs master bedroom, the detectives froze the frame. There, sitting innocuously on the tall wooden dresser, was a small plastic bottle of eye drops. Crucially, the dresser was located all the way across the large room, positioned far away from the bed. That was a spot where a man as dizzy, weak, and violently ill as Steve could not possibly get up and walk to retrieve it himself. The puzzle pieces violently snapped together. Now, it was very abundantly clear to law enforcement. This was absolutely not a natural death. Armed with this dark, undeniable chemical evidence, Detective Motes knew he urgently needed to have a very serious, recorded talk with the grieving widow, Lana Clayton. Exactly 5 weeks after the supposedly sudden, tragic death of her beloved husband, Lana Clayton found herself sitting in an austere interview room, being formally questioned by seasoned detectives. They started softly, casually framing the conversation by saying they just needed her help, acting as if she were merely a helpful witness in this confusing case for them. The detectives carefully guided the conversation, stating they wanted to know more about the specific medications and supplements they had officially found in Steve's blood during the autopsy. Lana nodded cooperatively, offering up innocent explanations. She leaned forward, adopting a helpful tone, and said she knew exactly what he would say about the drugs. She freely admitted that he regularly took allergy pills to help him sleep. She rattled off a fairly long list of benign, standard medications. But notably, throughout her entire cooperative explanation, there was absolutely no mention whatsoever of the eye drop chemical, the very drug that the lab proved had killed Steve. The terrifying reality of this specific liquid is that it is completely colorless, it is entirely odorless, and it is completely tasteless. These 3 stealthy traits are exactly what tragically makes it the absolute perfect weapon to secretly give to someone if you maliciously want to slowly poison them without raising their suspicions. The lab report showed that the concentrated level of this chemical found in Steve's blood was so incredibly high that it was mathematically, scientifically clear that it was the direct, primary cause of his death. It was a massive, undeniably lethal level. No matter what creative way a defense attorney might try to look at it, it was murder by poison. Knowing they had her trapped by science, the detectives began to press on harder. They dropped the friendly facade and confronted her with the baffling lab results. They stated firmly that somehow or another, there was a massively large amount of eye drop chemical found deep in his system. They leaned over the table, making direct eye contact, and stated that finding out exactly how that poison got there was what they were urgently trying to get to the bottom of today. Cornered, Lana's helpful demeanor subtly shifted. She desperately searched for a plausible explanation. She suddenly blurted out that she knew he voluntarily put the eye drops directly into his morning coffee. She claimed with a straight face that he bizarrely put in there every single day of his life. The detectives, incredulous at this absurd medical claim, asked her directly what she specifically knew about the physical effects of drinking the chemical. Lana stumbled over her words, stammering, "What do I know about it? I know it makes you have severe diarrhea." At this critical juncture, there were basically only 2 logical theories that the police were now seriously considering for the official case file. Theory number 1 was that he was intentionally, maliciously poisoned by another person, indicating clear foul play and premeditated murder. Theory number 2 was a highly unlikely scenario that he willingly and knowingly ingested a massive, fatal amount of the foul-tasting chemical entirely on his own, whether it was an intentional act of self-harm or a bizarre, tragic mistake. But as the police began to deeply probe the complex reality of Steve and Lana's intimate relationship, seeking a motive, A new, darker narrative began to emerge from the widow. The detectives gently asked her, "How has your daily life truly been behind closed doors?" Lana looked down at her hands and sighed, weaving a tale of hidden misery. She claimed that while sometimes they were genuine fun and everything seemed perfect, other times she felt like she would constantly be walking on fragile eggshells around his explosive temper. She emphasized the point, claiming, "All the time I was nervously walking on eggshells." Lana boldly claimed to the skeptical detectives that the beloved Jolly Steve actually had a deeply hidden, frightening dark side that he kept hidden from his family. She stated that behind closed doors, he could be really, truly nasty to her. When the detective pressed her, asking what exactly a nasty Steve looked and sounded like, she immediately claimed that he was really verbally abusive toward her, constantly belittling her and calling her cruel names. When asked for specific examples of what terrible things he would call her, she hesitated, then offered up generic insults, claiming he would call her stupid or use profanity, saying, "I do not know," just all kind of mean things. She painted a picture of rising